this SAFIN sponsored event today, Agri-SME Finance, Navigating Volatility in the Wake of the War in Ukraine. My name is Frank Rubio. I'm the Interim Coordinator for the SAFIN Network, and we are very, very happy to have all of you here with us today. We have an extraordinarily exciting afternoon, morning scheduled with very important and well-informed panelists on the topic of Ukraine. I think the special take that we're having on this particular event is that we're trying to focus very much along the main theme of the SAFIN network, which is improving access to finance to agri-SMEs. So the event is very much focused on looking at how agri-SMEs are affected by the current volatility, which, by the way, is as a result of Ukraine, but as we know, is also a result of an ongoing series of events that have been taking place globally over the past 2 years. So the way that we've structured the afternoon is we're starting with our first keynote speaker, who will basically set the stage in terms of the challenges that we're facing globally as a result of the Ukraine event. Then we'll delve right into the voice of the agri-SMEs. We have special invited agri-SMEs coming on board to speak as a result of our coordination with the Good Food Hub. Following that, we have a brief break. Then we'll enter into a discussion with financial institutions to better understand their take and their perceptions on how the global crisis and the volatility is affecting their risk perception and their approach to providing finance to agri-SMEs. That will be followed by another small break, and then we will have another session with development agencies to better understand how they're approaching the crisis. Finally, we will wrap up with a moderated session with Bettina Prato, who was the former SAFIN coordinator, who will be discussing with the different moderators of the 3 panels, plus the audience, summarizing some of the key issues that were raised, as well as some of the challenges, and also possibly looking at how networks like SAFIN might be able to address this crisis in the future. And then we will finalize with some final words from our esteemed SAFIN Steerco member, Mr. Panos Varangis from the IFC. So again, I'm very excited about this and welcome everyone. Let me just lay out a few very basic ground rules so everyone is clear on how we're functioning, how we're operating in the event over the next 3 hours. First of all, of course, we ask everyone to mute their microphones so that the speakers are not interrupted during their presentations. If you try to keep your video on, that would be great. It's always very nice to see people's faces and reactions to the different issues and things that are being raised. The event will be recorded, and of course, we will post this online immediately, hopefully by tomorrow, for people to be able to access and hear. Try not and please don't share any commercially sensitive information that you feel shouldn't be shared. And please be ready to interact through our polls and chats that we'll be introducing momentarily. So without further ado, I refer to Sylvia, my colleague, if you possibly could launch our first poll so that people can see.
With pleasure.
Sylvia. So everyone, here is a poll. If you could possibly respond. What type of institution, region, or focus region? What type of institution you represent or work for? If you could just fill that in. Okay, I think now we can end the poll.
That's done.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks. As you can see, it's quite a mix. We're a little bit low on financial service providers and donors up to now. I'm sure some will be showing up fairly soon. Right now, we have a nice, healthy mix of agri-SMEs, enterprise support organizations that provide technical assistance to agri-SMEs, as well as development and finance institutions. So my understanding, Emily, is that that's the end of the polling for now. We move on to our next speaker, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much. All right. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker. His name is Madhur Gautam, and he is the lead economist for agriculture global practices in the World Bank. Madhur, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First of all, thank you, Frank, and thanks to Michael and the team for the invitation to join you here and talk about some of what we see at the global level. As Frank said, I'm at the in the Global Engagements Unit, and for the past couple of years also been monitoring and coordinating the food security work that our global practice, agriculture and food global practice, has been doing with a multi-sector team. So let me share my slides with you on the topic for today, and set this up, and let me know when it's up and ready, when you see it.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk about some of the emerging issues of the impact of the war in Ukraine on global food security, and what we see emerging as a result of that. In doing so, I think the first thing is to remind ourselves that actually, the world was off track to meet the SDG targets even before the war started. And this was a combination initially of a lot of factors, including climate change. And you can see the global map at the top by a very interesting study by Ortiz Bobea and company, showing the impact of climate change on agricultural productivity. And you can see the red zones, which were the highest hit, basically losing almost 50%, compromising 50% of the growth to climate change. And this is highly coincidental with the bands of food insecurity that you see around the world.
Excuse me, Madhur?
Yes.
It would be great. We can see your slide, but it's not in present mode. So we see like 3 slides at once on the left. I don't know if you could do present mode, and then we can see the map a little more clearly.
Let me shut my monitor then to see, is that better or no?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, great. So you see the full screen?
Yes, now we can see it. Thanks.
Great. So in addition to climate change, there were ongoing conflicts and a lot of economic shocks that the countries faced. And of course, a number of policies around the world that have not helped. Certainly, whether they are hindered or not is subjective, but I think it's pretty clear that some of the policies have not been particularly helpful in this regard. And on top of this comes the Ukrainian crisis, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Just to put the war and its impacts in context, it's important to remind us that Russia and Ukraine are major exporters of food and fertilizers. And these are most critical for agriculture. I'm taking the point of view or basically focusing my comments mostly on agriculture, which is affected, of course, by fuels as well. But the major impact, the most direct impact that you see is through the immediate impacts is through grains and fertilizers. Russia and Ukraine together account for about 26% of wheat, 56% of sunflower oil, and a number of other commodities. And once you take that kind of supply out of the equation, obviously that's going to move markets significantly and have a huge impact on global prices. At the same time, beyond the immediate impacts of this supply shock, you have the issue of fertilizers, and this basically puts the future food security at risk, as a vast majority of the world of the countries are importers of fertilizers, and Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, mostly Russia and Belarus, are major suppliers of fertilizers. Nitrogen almost 15%, but they are dominant in players, in addition to Canada, on potassium-based fertilizers. So all of this starts to have an impact and raises a lot of concerns. And what you see immediately after the crisis, after the invasion, was prices had already been rising. But what you see, and specifically noticeable, is a sharp increase in food prices. Earlier, a lot of the price increase in the World Bank's Agriculture Commodity Price Index, food price index, agricultural price index, was driven by export commodities. These are non-food commodities or commercial crops that are exported by a number of countries. But the food markets had sort of been fairly resilient up to that point. They had started to rise from the middle of 2021. But what you see is a sudden sharp rise in cereals, and a lot of that was driven by, not surprisingly, wheat and to some extent maize, as these were the most affected crops by the Ukrainian the war in Ukraine. Their wheat prices have started to come down, but they remain significantly above what they were prior to the war. Rice has surprisingly, not surprisingly, but I guess it wasn't directly affected. Rice has been fairly stable, so it's been rising, though it remains a little bit below what it has been in the past couple of years. So there's a mixed story there, but you can see the impact, almost immediate impact of the crisis on prices. A lot of this translates into major food price inflation in countries, and on the left you see what is probably about as alarming as it has ever been. The vast majority of countries, close to 80% of the countries, are seeing very high levels of inflation. The left figure is in nominal terms, the right figure is real terms, that is food inflation in excess of CPI inflation. And there also you see a lot of countries have pretty high levels of inflation. Anytime food prices go above the CPI, means they're significantly above other commodity prices or other prices. You know that that has significant impacts on the poor directly through food prices, and the vast majority of the poor spend a significant amount of their incomes on food. And this is again, this shows the level of acute food insecurity around the world. It was at its highest level in 2021, reaching 193 million in IPC phase 3. But what we often don't pay attention to are the people in IPC phase 2, which are people who are highly vulnerable to food insecurity, and that's another 236 million people. And this was a significant jump from 2020 as a result of COVID. And in this year, we are bracing ourselves to see when the numbers come out later this year. We expect this number to jump significantly. And one of the surprising findings, not surprising, but I guess findings which has not been given enough attention, is through another metric, because the acute food security numbers are not available for countries. For all of the countries, they are available for about 53 countries that the global network monitors closely. A broader index is FAO's severely food insecure. And there what you see is very large numbers of people who are severely food insecure in middle income countries. And what you see is highest growth in actually upper middle income countries, and then lower middle income countries, followed by low income countries. So it's a global issue that one needs to pay attention to, and it's not just, it is of course very severe in the low income countries where majority of the acute food security is concentrated. But let's also keep in mind that this is a much broader issue. This is a global issue affecting almost all low and middle income countries. So when they looking at the Ukraine crisis, we see three major channels. And of course, there are many. We've sort of summarized them into three major channels. One is the first channel of transmission of the impact of the war is through countries that are directly dependent on Russia, or were dependent on Russia or Ukraine in terms of the imports of food, and mostly wheat. And here you can see a large number of countries who are highly dependent. And this is sort of looking at not just the level of their imports, but level of imports and also as part of their domestic consumption. The second channel is looking at countries beyond. Pretty soon after the first couple of weeks, the world prices rose, and not only countries that were directly dependent on Russia and Ukraine, but also the others who are facing severe food security risks and threats. And these are the countries that had high imports of food. And these are we have concentrated here on cereals, but also countries that have a fairly high share of calories coming from imported cereals, which gives you an idea of how much of the food security is directly at risk. And there's a large number of countries that are affected here. You can see significant numbers. So we have some arbitrary thresholds there at 20% and 10% of the undernourished population. Obviously, we're trying to also bring in countries that were already facing insecurity, and you can see a large number of countries who are at risk. And the final is, as I mentioned, fertilizers. The vast majority of the world imports fertilizers. Nitrogen is the most widely produced and exported. Next comes potash, and next comes phosphate, and potash is highly concentrated. The point here is that vast majority of the countries are net importers, and the high prices of fertilizer, which have increased of 3 to 4 times in the last couple of years, face significant future food security risks in terms of decreased production as the incentives for fertilizer use decline with rising prices. Some of this is compensated by rising commodity prices, but that's for wheat and maize to some extent. But it will deteriorate as the prices come down and fertilizer prices stay up. That's going to be a major issue. And lastly, a lot of countries are facing, highly indebted, especially after their response to COVID. Their fiscal space is extremely limited, so their capacity to borrow the increased to buy food at higher levels. The import bills have shot up, and they don't have the fiscal wherewithal to be able to meet it. So, and to be able to sustain their imports, are facing significant risks in terms of food security as they are unable to manage the imports. Now, when it comes to SMEs, what are the risk levels that we see? One, what you're seeing, and some of our IFC colleagues have also been highly concerned about this, and are making putting together programs along with us in terms of seeing how to address some of these risks. One is rising prices means higher costs, which means higher working capital needs. As we know, majority of the enterprises in the food value chains, agri-food value chains, both on the food side as well as on the input side, are small, medium enterprises, and their capital needs going to be significantly increased, and it remains an issue as to how they finance their operations. The second is market volatility is driving some of the banks, are making banks more risk averse. As a result, commercial finance is drying up, and this affects all of everybody in the value chain, including some major players. Global traders are also concerned about non-availability of finance to manage their operations, and this has become a big issue all along the value chain. Increasing energy costs, transportation costs are squeezing marketing margins, and rising interest rates are increasing the cost of borrowing. Foreign exchange movements, a lot of the foreign currencies are seeing significant depreciations, and that adds to additional burdens for domestic and especially informal SMEs along value chains. As the cost increases and demands curtail, local prices will rise, and largely is the hidden middle just largely ignored. Basically, SMEs are, or what is popularly now known as the hidden middle. And these are, in most food policy responses, we tend to focus on consumers or producers, but we tend to forget the middle. And I think we're trying to rectify that in some of our responses, but this remains an issue that needs to be brought to light a little bit more than it has in the past. In terms of the responses, the World Bank has put together a major roadmap, a global response for dealing with the impacts of the war in Ukraine, and this is laid out in the World Bank Group roadmap. As part of that, we have put together a comprehensive global response to the food security crisis, and making about 30 available to tackle both, and this is very important, not only the short-term emergency needs, but also long-term structural issues. The support is largely structured around four sort of themes. One is to facilitate unhindered trade. This is global and local. Second is support to consumers. The third is support to producers in the face of rising input costs, especially fertilizers and other inputs, and also looking at how to repurpose agricultural public policies and expenditures so that farmers can be much better supported and the finances can be used much more efficiently. And the last one is not to forget the long run, is to invest in sustainable food and nutrition security. There are a number of underlying issues that need to be tackled, and unless these are tackled, if we focus too much on the short run, forget about the long run, then the crisis will repeat as they have in the past. So it's extremely important we keep our eye on the ball as far as the medium and long-term agenda is concerned, and not get sidetracked from that. Largely, the opportunity also, the crisis also offers an opportunity. And here what we are trying to do is see how to address some of the inefficiencies and waste that exists in the current system. We know that globally about 79 countries provide about $640 billion annually in agricultural subsidies. The question is, a lot of this is not used efficiently. There's very low value for money. And the question here is, can these be repurposed? Can these sums of money be repurposed to address not only the current crisis, but also put the food system back on the path for more sustainable transformation to deliver triple wins, which is productivity, resilience, and sustainability. And this remains a huge agenda, and we're trying to take the opportunity where we can. I think the governments are also realizing, given their tight fiscal space, that this is an important opportunity to fix a lot of policies and programs that have not been quite as efficient in the past as they should have been. In terms of our support, there's a large, as I said, there's a large range of activities that we are focusing on. This is addressing all of the aspects, each of the aspects of food security as it is defined globally, and probably most clearly laid out by FAO in terms of food availability, access, stability, and utilization, underlying, as well as some of the underlying conditions. I won't go into the details, but there's a lot of focus on, we want to maintain focus on the short term and medium term, but with the eye keeping a clear vision, line of sight to the long term outcomes. And these are support to producers, consumers, and embedded in that is a lot of support for small and medium enterprises. The font is too small, and my idea was not to go through this or have everybody read this. We happy to make this available to anybody who wants to look at it. But just to lay out, we have a long menu of options that we are offering and suggestions on what can be done. For that, I have pulled out a couple of slides just showing what those options might be as they relate directly to small and medium enterprises. One is, and the way this is structured is to identify what can be done to support the actions that we see as necessary in terms of addressing the current crisis. And the immediate and short run, a lot of these are addressing supply chain efficiencies to reduce the cost of delivery and to strengthen SMEs who form the backbone of food supply chains in most developing countries. And here there's a range of activities that you can go down and suggestions and lessons of experience. This is promoting bulking through producer organizations, farmer groups, removing restrictive market regulations and all other annoyances along the value chain that add to the cost buildups, access to finance for formal and informal SMEs, promoting digital platforms to connect various supply chain actors, provide guarantees, and so on. And then there are these issues of how do you a lot of the informal SMEs are in the informal sector, so out of reach of formal systems. So we've also suggested, and we're working with our social protection colleagues to see how to scale up safety nets to perhaps start targeting also informal workers and informal SMEs. And again, look at other opportunities that we have, like productive inclusion activities to reach out to some of these players. And again, a lot of focus on supporting financial institutions' access to finance through various mechanisms to promote business continuity. And along with the medium, short run immediate responses, you have the medium to long term responses. And these are sort of targeted more towards trying to strengthen SMEs and see if we can sort of help them grow and become more less vulnerable and less fragile through technical and financial support, the investment and innovations and to support spill-ins on technologies and global value chains, strengthening IPRs and etc. There's a number of activities there, and I'm happy to share some of these for those who are interested. And that's it. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions. I know I went through this pretty fast. And I also touched, probably just barely touched on a lot of the topics, but happy to take up the questions and specific issues in Q&A.
Thank you so much, Madhur, for the very interesting presentation. And in fact, we do have some very good questions, but we are a little bit short on time. But so let me just go ahead and pick a couple. All of them are very relevant, but let me just pick a couple of quick ones to throw at you and then see how we manage the time. So we have one from Patricia Richter from ILO, and she writes, would be interesting to look at resilience building through rediscovering and focusing investments into more traditional crops instead of wheat that is not necessarily home across the world. And then she asked part of the sustainable food promotion. So it is a comment, but it is a question if you might want to try to respond a bit to that, this issue of looking at traditional crops over wheat as a long-term strategy for resilience. Over to you, Madhur.
Yes, thanks. So we are not prescriptive in specific crops, and I agree. And as part of the resilience and risk management strategy, as part of our climate smart agricultural approach, I think that's a very good suggestion. And a lot of countries are starting to rediscover some of these commodities, especially as they start to find out the nutritional and health benefits associated with some of those crops. So yes, absolutely. To the extent that diversification is feasible and possible. I mean, one has to keep in mind not just the health perspectives, but also the market perspectives to see where the markets are and perhaps start to work also on the education campaigns and public awareness campaigns on the benefits of some of these other traditional commodities, as is being done in a number of countries. I think that's a great idea in terms of making sure that the markets are there and the farmers have the incentive to sort of start to shift into those crops, which is, traditionally that's pretty much how they've shifted out of them, is the incentives moved away in favor of the newer cereals, which were more technologically advanced and easier to work on and develop new varieties and were more profitable. You're on mute.
Yes,
Frank.
thanks, Madhur. Sorry about that. Yeah, let me throw another one at you. This one from Songbei of USAID, Songbei Lee. Madhur, he mentions that he'd be interested to unpack a little more the contrasting situation of governments being over-indebted and SMEs needing more debt. Over to you.
Yeah, that's always an interesting question. When you talk about credit, are you talking about debt or are you talking about credit? And this is where I think, and early in my career, I did a lot of work on rural finance. And the way I look at rural finance is making finance available for firms, and this is a personal view. This is not an institutional view. I mean, my view is that making finance available so that the firms that are able to profitably use it and productively use it should not be rationed out. So the question is, when you talk about finance, not just to push finance, but to sort of make finance available. But the question that Songbei is raising is a very interesting and important one. The question is, how do you make that happen? One, finance is by and large in the private sector domain. So there are high government debts, so government budgets are tight. The issue really here is how much of the liquidity and availability of credit of finance there is in the private system to facilitate this. So the question of crowding in private sector remains extremely important. I'm assuming that's still the norm. We haven't gone back to huge public finance in rural and agribusiness financing.
Thank you, Madhur. Let me just throw out one more, which is actually a segue to our next panel. It's from Ian Randall, who's actually our moderator for the next panel. If you were a food entrepreneur, would you be trying to scale up local production as a business opportunity that might also mitigate the food crisis?
Well, yes. I mean, every time prices go up, the question of how competitive are you? You're in a competitive marketplace. So higher prices give you an opportunity to do that. At the same time, you have higher costs. So there's, to some extent that is offset. But what you want to also take advantage of is the competitive advantage. As the cost of transportation and energy costs rise, imported foods or foods that travel longer distances are going to be at a disadvantage as you lose out on some of the competitive pricing in terms of the local market. So yes, I mean, opportunity, when the opportunity is there, entrepreneurs will step in and should make the most of it in terms of, and then that as Ian says, that creates an opportunity for both not only addressing some of the local demands, for addressing local demands in terms of local production.
Thank you very much, Madhur, for the excellent presentation and the response to the questions. We're now going to move on to our next panel. One thing, Madhur, that just to clarify, we're assuming that we can share this presentation. We have had some requests from others for that. We assume that's okay. If it's yes, then you can also write in the chat if you'd like, just to confirm that.
Yeah, I can share. I'll send you the final presentation, and there's probably some extraneous materials in there that I'll take out and send it to you. That can be shared.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ian Randall, Director of the Good Food SME Hub. and he will be facilitating our next panel session on agri-SME voices, impacts of the crisis on the ground. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Frank. Well, all you entrepreneurs out there, you heard it from the lead agricultural economist at the World Bank. It's time to scale up. There's a business opportunity to be had here in responding to this crisis. So I'm director of the Good Food Hub. We were born out of the UN Food System Summit last year. We're a global community of small businesses making our food more nourishing, sustainable, equitable, and resilient. And really, we're here in lots of ways, both channel support to SMEs, but also give voice to entrepreneurs, that hidden middle, and get them into policy spaces like this. You know, really, we are the entrepreneurs that sit right between consumers and farmers in the middle of this crisis, and feel those tensions you went through on charts as daily realities. So we're really grateful to SAFIN to invite the Good Food community here today to get heard by policymakers and financial institutions. We want to make sure that actually throughout this session, entrepreneurs, we do give you a chance to raise your voices, your experiences, and realize how do we do that with lots of you on the line. So we've got a tool that hopefully is an interactive tool. It's a bit of an experiment, but we're risk takers. Let's see what happens, innovators. So we've got this thing called a Padlet. I'm just going to show you how to use it, and then I'll give you the link. Basically, there's two columns here: challenges that SMEs are facing and actions that SMEs are taking. So we've got a few things that we've already heard from you all through conversations we've had on the Good Food Hub. So these things that people have said already. So if I take my own family business, we're a beach cafe. Actually, you know, we've certainly seen commodity prices rising, so I can give that a little tick. And oh, why is that not clicking for me? There we go. Give that a tick. And I might also say, well, actually, we just pass those on to, as our action, we pass them on to consumers. But, you know, thankfully, our customers are accepting the rise at the moment. So we're a bit unusual. We're lucky to have some wealthy beach-going customers. And also, we haven't experienced energy cost rises because we have solar panels. So we were lucky to be ready for this moment. So you can add a few things there. And if you weren't, if there's things that you are experiencing that aren't on the list at the bottom, you could add a different challenge down here. So yeah, there might be the kind of the cost of capital is increasing is something maybe we've heard. So you could publish that, and that gives something else that people can add in. So feel free throughout the session to go ahead and use this. I will now share that link and just have a play during the session. I'm going to stop my screen share so that you don't see lots of them, but I'm putting in the chat that link. Feel free to add your experiences, and later on I'll also use this through the other sessions as we talk about the kind of actions being taken by financial service providers and kind of development agencies as well to kind of capture some things there. So have that as a place to play with. But having said that, it's actually time we're going to meet some brilliant entrepreneurs who are in the thick of things right now, figuring out a response to the food crisis. We are very lucky to be joined by three wonderful entrepreneurs. Firstly, Bature Patience, who's the CEO of Parkea Ventures in Nigeria. She runs a distribution company, has products that blend wheat flour with domestically grown fonio flour. So absolutely doing that thing of shifting to domestic kind of local crops and bringing them to the fore. Ruchi Jain, CEO of Taru Naturals in India. She leads a grassroots fair trade network that connects thousands of smallholder farmers to markets for organic produce. And then Nouran who's co-founder of Plug and Grow in Egypt, a hydroponic and aquaculture tech company that provides growers with highly efficient food factories. And you can see one behind Nouran's head right now. And they produce premium quality vegetables and fish. So absolutely fabulous to have the three of you on the line today. Really grateful for both the work you do, the innovation. I know you're in it every day making this stuff happen. And I'm going to ask you two questions, and I want to hear from each of you about each of them. So first question that we'll hear from each of you about is, tell us a bit about how the rising costs of food, fuel, and fertilizer have affected your business, and how are you responding as entrepreneurs? Patience, I want to start with you and your experience in Nigeria of running your distribution company that was dependent on wheat flour as well as fonio flour. So you're in that tension right now. So tell us a bit about your story and how you're responding. You're on mute, Patience. We just need to get you off mute.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Okay. I came up with what they call a coping strategy. And you know the saying that says when the going gets tough, only the tough gets going. I'm personally experiencing it in the field. And if I had just my manager working, I would think, oh, this guy is a poor manager. He doesn't know how to manage this thing. But being the one in the forefront of managing the business, it's not the
Patience, can I just ask you get a little closer to your phone? It's a little bit echoey and slightly hard to hear. So maybe if you're closer, that will make it easier for us to hear. But we have had the tough got going. Carry on.
Can you hear me now?
Maybe a little bit better. Anyway, yeah.
Is it clear enough?
Yes, okay, carry on. It's good.
Okay, I came up with what they call a coping strategy. I said earlier that when the going gets tough, only the tough gets going. As the price of wheat keeps increasing, I had to do what they call reduction of my workforce. I laid off some of the workers that I felt were not meeting up. I have to reduce my dough sizes because our company, we also have the baking aspect of our business where we make bread. I have to reduce my supply chain efforts from distributors to sell out of the line. We have to look for ways to get to consumers directly. We have to open more outlets where we sell our products. We have to increase our prices. And the annoying thing is that the prices go up every week. Or let's say every 2 days. We get to the market today, it's 10,000, tomorrow it's 12,000, the next day it's 14,000. They are not announcing the best increase of the prices. And so the more they increase those prices, the more we reduce our packaging sizes, the more we reduce our dough sizes, the more we reduce our workforce, and we just increase our prices so that we can be sustainable. I won't say our profit increased because our profit remains the same. In fact, it's shrinking. So we are doing all this stuff to stay in business. I did a little survey. I was asking by customers, what is the close up? What if there's no fonio bread? Because we have a mixture of acha and fonio alone, the fonio bread, wheat and fonio bread. So I was asking them like, I was joking. I said, the cost of production is getting to us. We are about to close up. And it's still they were like, please do not close up. Please, we'll keep buying. We'll don't keep trying. We'll keep, those resources, I got emotional because it's getting to me. I will not lie about it. It's getting to me. We've just been managing to cope. And because we add fonio to our production, it makes our bread a bit heavier. It gives it that heavy look. It keeps you fuller for longer. And we've been a company that we've been looking into fonio for years. We're not just a wheat reliance company. We've been looking into fonio for years. We're packaging fonio in cereal form, in bread form. And so as the price of wheat goes up, we are a fonio focused company. We've been preaching the gospel of fonio for years now. And so we started introducing fonio more to other bakeries. We're telling them you can also include fonio to your production. Fonio is locally stored. You can get fonio here in Nigeria. You don't need to rely on wheat alone. You don't need to stay, on wheat production alone. We can look into fonio and give it a tasty. So in fact, we went into this business because we wanted to be fonio tasty. So as wheat became so expensive, we started preaching the gospel of fonio. We started working more with our rural women farmers. If you look behind me, there's a project we're embarking on with my partner company, Interim Limited. We are looking at, giving Fonio that facility of producing over 1.5 metric tons of Fonio yearly, working with over 3,000 women farmers. In Nigeria, for instance, about 5.6 million tons of wheat is what we need, but only 62,000 tons is produced yearly. And so we spend about $2 billion importing wheat from different countries like Russia. And so right now, there's a challenge for wheat. There's a Russia and Ukraine crisis. It's time to look home. It's time to look inward. It's time to give our other rural crops, a facelift. Because Fonio is richer. Anything you do with Fonio gives you double or triple what you're looking for. It has more fiber. It's rich in iron. The taste is also wonderful. Yes, it's easier to work with. Don't forget that. But as a company, we're looking for ways to make Fonio more reachable. We want to make it, easily in the hands of our consumers. So we've been relying on Fonio to help us, to help us reduce our dependence on wheat.
That is really inspiring, Patience. It's great to hear your passion, and you embody a lot of the things we've been talking about at the grand scale in both your response, so having to make things smaller, basically passing on the costs and finding efficiencies onto the consumers in terms of to make you sustain your profitability, and at the same time seeing this big opportunity to switch to local, more nutritious, kind of more inclusive crops and take that to market and persuade consumers to go through that transition with you. Absolutely fantastic to see that entrepreneurial leadership that's part of responding to this food crisis. Let me move now to Nouran. You're in your business fits in a different place in the supply chains, and you're in Egypt. But tell us a bit about your business and how the rising costs have affected you and how you're responding as Plug and Grow to this moment.
Okay, so I'm Randall. I'm the Business Development Director and co-founder of Plug and Grow. We are a specialized provider of soilless technologies, basically. When we started Plug and Grow, it was in late 2019, so it was right before COVID. It was a time that the Egyptian market specifically was very interested in the technology due to the traction that has started to be in the market, the number of farms that have been established, and the success stories that started emerging. So it was very interesting, especially that the technology tackles a lot of the challenges growers are facing: water scarcity, climate change, sustainability, and quality and traceability for those who are interested in export and so on. So when COVID came, a lot of the activities and the conversations that were open on a number of projects were basically stopped. So because everyone was concerned whether they should go on and invest in this high capital technology at that time. But with time and with the pressures that happened for basically the agricultural supply chains and the challenges and everything else, by the end of 2020, actually, we had started seeing action again, and we had started seeing a lot of interest once more. And then this has started building up a little bit slowly, and what we did was trying to basically survive this time period. We started working on a very lean structure for the company, so that we're very revenue oriented or structured, basically, so that every single person on the team is working on something that is revenue generating to ensure that we could go on throughout that time. And with the impact of climate change that has started to be very evident over the past 2 years, and especially after the Ukrainian war, with the productivity levels that are seen, unforeseen actually, productivity levels over the past 2 years in a lot of crop ranges and so on, interest has started rising again, and interest to invest in those technologies has started to become a high priority for a lot of entities, whether it was on the side of growers who are interested to guarantee their investments into the future and guarantee the sustainability of their business over the next years. So we started seeing large agri-businesses interested to convert their business into that direction. And this was one of our focal areas across this year, for instance. And we've been mainly focusing on large businesses who are looking to do this conversion. But also we're seeing a lot of traction from small to medium scale growers who are interested to basically shield themselves or try to basically, as I said earlier, guarantee the sustainability of their business and adapt to the changes that are now facts, including water, climate, environment, and also the vulnerability of the supply chains. So for us, though the impact of those basically very grim events were somewhat an awakening call. It was a push that everyone started looking into sustainable technologies and seeing the importance of their application. But the challenge, as usual with every new technology, is the high capital cost versus the often very low cost traditional practices. And this is exactly where we're at the moment, and this is what we're trying to work on to allow and facilitate further the adoption of this technology on a larger and wider scale, and generally, whether it was in Egypt or the entire region.
Thanks, Nouran. It's fantastic to hear what you're doing, and it feels like you're part of a much larger transition that speaks to this long-term issue around the resilience of our food systems in the context of climate change, and that this is overlaying on that, and the need for new technology and more kind of local domestic sourcing. There's a lot in that that you're doing, so thank you for that. And then there's that call for capital to enable it to happen. Ruchi, you're in India. You're again different sort of player in the food system here. Tell us a bit about your story in this moment in time.
Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you, Nouran, and everyone for the opportunity. So I'm the CEO and founder of Taru Naturals. Taru means tree in Sanskrit. It's a network of small-scale farmers. What we do is we run an end-to-end value chain mentoring service for small-scale farmers. So very early in my journey, I realized that actually there's a lot of disjointed supply chains from the small-scale farmer, farms to the markets. So that means that we have typically really fragmented land for small-scale farmers across India. So like typically, I would say 70% of agriculture in India is small-scale farmer run, which is a huge number. And it's going to only just increase because as the families fragment more and more, the land is going to get even more fragmented. So it's really about creating a model and an agro ecosystem as I went along my journey as to how to create these small farms to become businesses which are more profitable. And that's why we came up with this customized, unique mentoring service in which not only do we teach small-scale farmers natural farming, which is regenerative agriculture based on the microbes, soil health. So that's what we call it in India, and natural farming. And then really looking at the accounting, logistics, the entire aspect of the supply chain, whereas in quality and warehousing, all those aspects which are really important to get a product out. And then we have an organic brand, which is called Taru, T-A-R-U, and we have like an e-commerce website, tarunaturals.com, where we sell our products. So early, before COVID, actually, my entire focus was B2B. And it's very interesting that we've had a journey in terms of being an SMB, because from supplying to B2B to restaurants to trying to get chefs to diversify their produce into millets and to different raw materials, to really focus on, and my mother, she's a naturopath doctor. She's like the co-founder of my company. And we've really been brought up in traditional medicine and plant medicine and ancient medicine, like ancient grains and millets. So that's always been the focus. So we were really trying to get a lot of the hospitality sector and the restaurant sector to actually cater to increasing awareness in chefs and the cuisine in restaurants. But then when COVID hit, half of the restaurants shut down. So we were actually in a lurch. And that's when we actually decided to pivot. And although we were focusing direct to customer and exports, we didn't really, we didn't actually take it on so much before. So now during COVID, and especially with the prices increasing and so much happening in the world economy, we really increased our exports and direct to customers. So we have Amazon and so many other marketplaces. And food diversity was a very big key of it, because we realized that out of everything which was imported in India, we started replacing it with the local grain diversity, because everyone thinks that, okay, how about having a red amaranth instead of red quinoa, for example, which is very popular, but nobody probably eats a red amaranth, which is a very ancient grain in the palate of India and has survived and is climate resilient, for example, or like a sticky rice instead of an imported Thai sticky rice, you know. So a lot of our food innovation started happening, which is already there before, but during COVID and Ukraine, we were really in a spot wherein we had to deal with so much stock, and we had to overnight think about strategies of increasing our market base and to really look at the revenues to come out of, okay, how can I sort of have produce which is across different market segments, and also incorporate like the legacy and Ayurvedic knowledge of India, which is very ancient, which is based on health, on sustainability, and also a lifestyle, which is yogic, right? So really incorporating that with my mother's influence, and then the diversity of small-scale farmers, because a small-scale farmer is not monoculture, right? They typically have like less than an acre of land, and they will sustain with 5-6 different crops at the same time. And one item has to be high margin. For example, we do flowers, you know, like roselle flowers or different tea flowers. Or we've even started pancake pre-mixes for basically easy to cook meals for mothers, so that children can have a tasty meal, because they prefer something which is very Americanized sometimes, right? So how do we incorporate those ancient grains and also take care of the food security aspect to it? So the whole value chain then comes to place end to end, and that's where we have a beautiful agro ecosystem for small scale farmers, which then resonates to customers. So that's the model.
Yeah, you are so inspiring. All three of you are so inspiring. You know, in this time of kind of darkening clouds over our heads, it's so fantastic to hear the work you're doing and the sense of opportunity. The turning to local markets and making them work in ways that have so many benefits. But to get to the topic of the whole call, we all need some finance to make that work. So, and we're going to need to be relatively quick because we're, of course, getting behind on time. But a couple of minutes from each of you on, if you're going to realize this opportunity in the places that you are to scale up your business in this moment of crisis, what do your financing needs look like? What are you doing to get the finance in the right ways? You know, what's your ask to the world there? Patience, do you want to go first on that? You're still on mute there, Patience. Oh, no, that's working. You got it.
Okay, like I said earlier, we've been an advocate for fonio, and so we are actually looking at, we've already started making things with fonio. We've made bread out of fonio, made a fonio bread out of fonio. We've also made cake out of fonio. We've experimented with pasta, how to make spaghetti from fonio, because I noticed a lot of those things are made from this. And so we made pasta from fonio, that's spaghetti. And we're also working with smallholder farmers to give us about 1.5 million metric tons of fonio, so that it can be accessible. Because once these things are accessible, once they are reachable, every other person will be able to use it. And so to reduce the dependence on wheat, it reduces the over-reliance on wheat. Fonio is drought resilient. It's something that's just grown in 6 to 8 weeks. And it will create job opportunities, because right now people are losing jobs. A lot of people are losing their jobs. So fonio will create job opportunities. It will be an employment opportunity, because there'll be a new food trend and people are looking for something. So in order to end this crisis, we need to look into our local crops. That's one innovation we are putting in place at the moment to help with this crisis.
And where are you getting the finance from to do that? Tell me about how you're raising the capital.
been very tough, very tough. We're working with friends and families, people who trust us, like one of our partners there. Please say hello. He's been a portfolio. He's also passionate about folios, invested in our company. Like I said, we have Hedgeway Limited. That's the company we are using to, push our folio mission. It's a very serious get access to finance, because people will tell you it's a new stuff. Will it be accepted? Will it be accepted? There's this fear. There's this, will I get my money back? And will I get my money back kind of thing. So if we get grants, it will help push what we are aiming at. If we get access to grants, it will help push. Like I have personally gone in for over 6 types of competitions this year. I've entered for over different kinds of competitions, so I could get grants, free grants to, help this looming crisis. So if I'm selected, if I'm picked, I'll get access to finance.
That's great. Thank you. And in that, I hear you're doing what a lot of entrepreneurs do, is turn to family and friends first for that capital. They trust you, they know you, they believe in you, they understand the local market. And then also, you're going to places where you can get some support, whether that's accelerator programs that give you grants, but perhaps also advice in this moment where you're being pushed into new ways as an entrepreneur to grow your business. Nouran, tell us a bit more. You're in a kind of different place, a different context. What are your financing needs and how are you getting them met at this time?
Well, okay. So I definitely agree with patients. Getting financing has been quite challenging, especially over the past, let's say, 7-8 years in the agri space or even agri-tech space. But what we see is that things are a little bit better now. There's interest in agriculture and agri-businesses and agri-tech. Maybe investors are still basically raising their awareness or learning more about the industry and its in-depth and so on, which makes things a little bit slower. But I think that we're going to get there. For us, we are a bit lucky. We are, as I said, we're a technology company, so we get to benefit from grants, research grants to develop our technology and work with very great academics, basically, and research institutes and so on. So that's amazing. Financing terms, I think we have been successful in basically not really needing a lot of financing so far. But now, since we want to scale up the business, we're looking for finance. But I think for us, this is not really a big challenge at the moment, since we have a proven model and a proven product that has traction and so on. But what for us, what would really make a difference, and that is really dependent on the financial sector, would be the availability and the facilitation of financing for growers who want to adopt technologies like soilless technology, because this is usually very capital intensive. And even if there are agriculture financing programs, they're usually capped at very low numbers, which are not really suitable for the adoption of these types of technology. This is the first thing. And second thing is that there are basically application standards tied to those financing. So I'm really interested in having frameworks that are specifically tailored and dedicated for the application of hydroponic technologies based on the country's needs and priorities and so on. In my opinion, this will facilitate the growth of this technologies adoption, which will help the sustainability factor and the impact that we can do in the agriculture sector, but also on so many levels, whether it was on water, on energy consumption and carbon emissions. So for me, I think the participation of the financial sector should be, I would really hope that it would allow the adoption on facilitate the adoption and the awareness of sustainable technologies, basically in the agriculture sphere.
Thank you, Nouran. I mean, what I hear in your story actually is an investment community that is actually on the right trajectory of having a growing interest and understanding in the sector in a way that's been ignored for a long time. But there's still work, and perhaps at this moment, something that this group might do is to lean into that community and help them accelerate their learning journey and their confidence as they come and kind of connect with people like you that have a relationship with farmers and growers that need investment and actually present investment opportunities. But there's just a little bit of like pushing that pipeline along, getting them over getting the confidence that, yes, this is the moment to finally invest. The market is right and the real opportunities are there. So there's something in that I think that we need to listen to. Ruchi, your business different again. Curious to hear about your financing situation and how you're responding in this moment, and any requests for the community that's on this call.
So I call myself a frugal entrepreneur because I started my company with 1,000 rupees, which is almost $10 to $20. And it was really hard in the beginning. And, just focusing on products like millets, climate resilient grains, and really the passion of driving it through is what really kept me going, because finance was really hard and it still is. But yes, we do believe that we are investment ready and to scale up, and we need to reach out to VCs. But the thing is, like, what is the enabling environment to reach out to even a VC who understands the work we are doing is the question. Because we are doing a lot of social impact work, and there's very few impact investors who would understand the scale. Scale of a bottom line versus social impact. So that is the first question. The second thing is the enabling environment for a consumer-focused brand. Yes, we need to build revenues. We need to be profitable at the end of it. So it's very hard for us to do the marketing and like in what is required for a D2C brand to sort of compete with the larger brands which are there in the market. So everything from services like digital marketing or marketing connects to retail giants, to having a product in the right place. I mean, why is it that we have to constantly prove ourselves, as a food brand which is doing social impact work, right? And we have to compete with the biggies. So there needs to be an enabling environment for new products and food security products with food and cutting edge food innovation to stand out in the market, even though it is competing with the rest of the products, because we are doing good work, There is a reason why we are doing what we are doing. Like she's doing fonio, I'm working with millets, I'm working with so many beautiful flowers and different products which are made by women farmers, they're grown in natural farming. So constantly we have, and it's great to have this competition, but the enabling environment for retail and for marketing is what would be really interesting for us to succeed. So that is the second ask. And the third thing is we are doing really well now, but 4 years ago, when I needed help in seed funding, I received a little bit of funding. In fact, we received funding from the UNFSS last year as well. I know I used those $2,000 in buying a machine for my warehouse. So please don't underestimate the use of little bit of money for seed funding, which can be given to small scale entrepreneurs to reach a certain amount of scale, because that mentoring service which we give to small scale farmers now, and that agro ecosystem which we are creating for farmers now, that is what is required. And there's plenty and dime of support for clean technology, climate technology startups, but very less and we realized that halfway. So that's why we partnered and developed a retail SAP, supply chain, blockchain, technology for our startup to reach out to mentoring service for the farmers, because then we are investment ready. But before that, we were not investment ready. So that was a challenge, right? Because we are now using blockchain because it's fancy, but it's also very expensive. And we use blockchain traceability only for export clients, because for India, it doesn't make sense. Why would I use blockchain traceability for Indian markets? I mean, it's too expensive, right? But that's what made me investment ready. So let's define what is investment ready in terms of small scale farmers. Does it only depend on climate technology? So there's a lot of cliches which need to be broken down if we are looking at what is an investment ready SME and what is it that we need to actually create that ecosystem for more entrepreneurs like me, like Pat, like Nouran, to come up and do path-breaking work, you know? So I guess, sorry, these are some of my asks.
It was fantastic. It's really, I mean, what's wonderful about you is the range of different ways that you can get financial support, you know, and listening to you all together, it's everything from family and friends to VC companies coming in with large amounts of investment on a commercial basis through to seed grants. You know, there really is the full sort of suite of options. But I believe that what you as entrepreneurs are doing right now is responding to this moment in time, is moving the food system in significant ways. And it is absolutely right that we should be asking the finance sector to kind of get behind us and the development community to get behind us in this moment. So thank you all. I've just, I know, Frank, I should be at time, but we were probably about 10 minutes late when I got, so I'll see if I can gain us 5 minutes on this, take 5 more minutes. I'm just going to share the screen of what people have said in the Padlet so far. So if I come over here, and I'd encourage more people to put the link back in to keep adding their thoughts in here. But in terms of the things that got thumbs up, definitely energy costs, fertilizer costs, commodity prices, less so wage bills rising, less so capital too costly or inaccessible or trade barriers. So it really is those three big things are the things that people are flagging. And, you know, we've certainly heard that in the chats on the Good Food Hub. We've got somebody with a, go on mute. Can we find that person, put them on mute? There we go, thank you. And certainly people, looks like they're passing prices on to consumer. That's the biggest response we've got from folks. Otherwise, it's relatively even in terms of the response. A couple of people scaling up local production, which certainly seems like that's what we're hearing from patients Nouran and Ruchi. Looking here, there was a couple of people that made some interesting comments. And if you want to just build out on those in any way, I'm going to take maybe one to share some thoughts from the audience. So somebody had their hand up a moment ago. Does anybody want to just share their own experience at this time? I can't see if anybody's got their hand up. They did a moment ago. Was that it was, I think maybe Francoise, I think you had your hand up, or Nafeza, I know you're on the call here. I saw you earlier. I know crop nuts in Kenya. You've had a really interesting experience. Nikeza, do you want to just share a moment, add a different perspective coming from Kenya and where you sit, maybe just 1 or 2 minutes on your experience there, perhaps building on some of the things other people have said?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian, for the opportunity. And just sharing the case of Kenya, I work for a soil testing company. We deal with smallholder farmers. And I think one of the key things we've seen is increasingly the fertilizer costs going up and also the energy costs that are going up. And this is impacting definitely on food, because we look at like industries that are doing value addition that would probably put food on the table, things like bread making, things like rice value addition. So you find most of the foods that are currently being procured by most of the normal citizens are really, the prices are really high. And then just linking that back to the business, of course, there's a couple of other things that have come up. It's quite an interesting year. We have effects of climate change also impacting. And then when you look at now what is happening in Russia, Ukraine, and you know the impact on the fertilizer prices, which is definitely making services like soil testing that are a necessity in terms of improving soil health and you know mitigating some of these risks that are impacted by climate change. Then you find that most farmers now are avoiding to soil test because it's no longer a necessity. There's a gamble between do I soil test, do I spend money on soil testing, or do I buy the inputs to increase my productivity? But you know, the two activities are actually linked, because if you don't know your soil health or actually the nutrients that you require for your, for your farming or production, crop production, then obviously you might end up spending on products that might not really impact positively on the yield. So we are having quite a bit of I would call it negative impact on food production. But again, on a personal view, I think it's also an opportunity for local food production to actually come up. I've seen quite a bit of comments about local value addition, going back to the, to those cassava production, sorghum production, the foods that are more resilient to climate change, and also to just look at, for example, if you're using, we were importing a lot of wheat, can we now move to cassava, which is being locally produced? So there's a lot of opportunities as well in the industry, but also we have to look at then, how do we look at alternative sources? Looking at sub-Saharan Africa, are we sufficient enough to provide within the continent? There are so many countries that can actually, do business within each other. So what are those opportunities that can arise from such, such a crisis? So looking at flipping the coin to look at the positive side. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I could listen and talk to all you entrepreneurs forever, but I know I'm supposed to be wrapping up now. So I do encourage you to keep in the chat. There is a link to the Padlet. Keep adding in your thoughts there. I am really compelled by almost the fork in the road presented by the stories of all you entrepreneurs. Nikeza, your story was the same here, of a moment where under these pressures of increased commodity prices, increased fertilizer prices, increasing in some places cost of finance. I'm hearing labor costs are going up as well because people are demanding higher wages to cover their own living income. All those things are adding on this pressure, and that businesses are doing one of two things. They're either retreating, getting smaller, they're backing off, and that carries risks, that the farmers aren't going to plant the next harvest. They're making those shortcuts that you were talking about, Nikeza, at which point we are headed for a really dark place if everybody steps away. But equally, you're all looking for the opportunity to say, we can do this, everybody. Come on, let's go. You are the entrepreneurs. You're the innovators. You're the go-getters, the risk takers. They're saying, let's scale this up. We can turn this food system around and actually make it better. But the key constraint in that is you getting the finance you need. So this sets us up wonderfully for the next two sessions, where we're going to hear something from finance service providers about how they're going to back you at this time, and then the development community about how they can back you too. So let me wrap up with that. Please keep using the Padlet. I'm really thankful to Ruchi, Patience, and Nouran for taking the time to share your stories on behalf of small businesses everywhere, and Nikeza. So thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break now, and then we will return. So if you need a little break to go and get yourself a cup of tea, glass of water, this is your time. And I guess it's 8:52. Should we say we're going to start at 8:57 in American time? All right. See you soon. Thank you.